Hi everyone. I hope you're all well. I'm Harry. I'm a business development manager here at Giant. Here today with my colleague Adam. Going to run through what AWR is. Adam's got some questions, so I'll let you introduce yourself as well, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so welcome everybody to the podcast. My name's Adam, one of the key account directors here at Giant, and going to do a podcast on AWR, and Harry's going to go through that for us. So, Harry, what is AWR?
Yeah, thank you. So AWR is a regulation that was introduced in 2011 as a measure to protect agency workers by granting them the same rights as their permanent employee counterparts.
Okay, so what exactly is an agency worker?
So an agency worker is an individual supplied by a temporary agency, and they'll obviously have a contract to carry out work personally for their hirer. The agency worker can also be an individual who supplies their services through an umbrella company, such as what Giant does.
Okay, so what rights does AWR entitle an agency workers to?
So the rights are broken down into day one rights and week 12 rights. So the day one rights apply from day one of the assignment, of course, and the week 12 rights from week 12 of the assignment. So the day one rights are quite basic, quite easy to understand, and they entitle the worker to equal access to facilities in the workplace. And that includes canteens, childcare facilities, transport, toilets and showers, common rooms, prayer rooms, food and drinks machines, and car parking. It also states that the temporary workers need to be informed of any relevant vacancies in the workplace. So this point can be confusing as it specifies the right is only to be informed about the vacancies and not to actually apply for them. But this right is meant to give the agency workers an advantage over external applicants as they know the job postings are there before everyone else. So more importantly, moving on to week 12 rights. These are the most commonly referred to rights as they encompass the pay element, which is what we all care about. This section of AWR states that an agency worker should be entitled to the same basic working conditions as they would be entitled to had they been directly employed by the hirer for the same job. So that means not hired by the agency. There is a qualifying period of 12 weeks from the start date of the assignment, after which these rights apply. So it's worth noting that if an agency worker has worked on an assignment for that same hirer in the past 6 weeks, this may actually count towards the qualifying period, meaning the week 12 rights can come into play sooner.
Okay, lovely. So what are these conditions that they're entitled to?
Yeah, good question. So it refers to the terms and conditions which are ordinarily included in contracts with employees that are directly employed by that hirer. So that means that one-off arrangements do not count. It's just the usual terms and conditions that are put in contracts with permanent employees. For example, the Jubilee Bank holiday last year was a one-off arrangement. Therefore, agency workers under AWR would not have a right to it. Specifically, the list of terms and conditions that AWR covers includes pay, duration of working time, night work, rest periods, and annual leave. So to dive more deeply into the pay element, which agency workers have an equal right to, this includes basic pay, overtime pay, shift or unsociable hours allowances, risk payments for hazardous duties, payment for annual leave, and bonus and commission payments. So bonus and commission payments only apply when they actually directly relate to the amount of work or the quality of the work done by the worker. So therefore, non-performance related bonuses such as a Christmas bonus that does not relate to how well the work is actually done, that would not count. However, commission based on sales performance would count. So elements of pay which AWR do not apply to include sick pay, pensions, paternity and maternity pay, adoption pay, redundancy, notice pay, advances, expenses, and payment for time off during trade union activities.
Cool, cheers. Yeah, so that's obviously a lot of information to take in. Have you got some particular examples to help understand that?
Yeah, of course. So just before we get into the examples, it's good to know how a worker can actually make a claim. So the worker can either make a hypothetical claim against what terms and conditions they would have been under should they have been employed directly by the hirer. So we'll have an example on that later. Or they can choose a qualifying comparator to compare the terms and conditions against. So that's a worker working around them in their company. This comparator must be working for the hirer and under their supervision, and they must be engaged in a similar work and have a similar level of qualifications or experience. So now that we know how they can make a claim, I'll go on to some examples. So example one, imagine you've got permanent engineers working under the hirer, and there's a clear pay structure for all of these permanent engineers. So they're all on £14 to £20 an hour. The agency worker is in the exact same role, same level of qualifications and experience as many of those permanent workers, and they're on £12 an hour. So this is a very easy example because the agency worker can see these workers next to them. They can see the pay structure that's written out. And after the 12-week qualifying period, they can make a claim to have their rate uplifted. The second example, exact same situation, but this clear pay structure is not communicated anywhere, it's not in contracts. However, the worker can still see these workers around them. So it's important for the agency workers to do a bit of investigation themselves and have a bit of a sniff around to see what are my colleagues earning that are on the same qualifications and experience level as me. The agency worker can choose their comparator as well, as long as they satisfy the criteria. So it's good for the workers to understand this, as they can actually choose the most highly paid comparator as long as they meet the criteria. And after the 12-week period, they can make that claim. So lastly, if there are no comparators around the worker and no comparable pay structures either, obviously it can be quite hard for the worker to find someone to compare their situation against. There is a rule, as mentioned, which states that agency workers can make a hypothetical claim against what terms and conditions would have been applied to them if they were employed directly by the hirer. So for example, say you've got an office environment, they've never really used a temporary agency before. All the staff are permanent, but they now hire a new receptionist through a temp agency. Say there's a common theme that all staff in the office have 6 weeks annual leave, and that applies to absolutely everyone. But the agency worker has only 4 weeks annual leave. So in this situation, again, although there's no staff in the exact same role, the worker can see that everyone in the office has this. Therefore, they can make a claim that if they were hired directly by the hirer, they would have had this in their terms and conditions. Again, after week 12, under AWR, they can make this claim.
Okay, perfect. So with AWR, who is liable for this?
Yeah, so the day one rights that we first talked about, it's just the hirer that has liability for those. The week 12 rights actually falls on both the temporary agency and the hirer. So when it goes to a tribunal, the claim, the tribunal will determine the appropriate amount of compensation payable by each party based on their responsibility for the breach. So therefore, agencies should take steps to ensure they are compliant to reduce that liability.
Okay, perfect. And then talking about liability, what should the agencies be doing to ensure that they are compliant?
Yeah, exactly right. So it's important for agencies to understand that. Each party in the chain has a responsibility to provide or request this comparator data. So agencies need to be asking their hirers for information and acting upon it to ensure that agency workers are treated fairly in accordance with AWR. So the usual process is that the agency will ask the hirer if they have any permanent workers which are in a similar role and have a similar level of qualifications or skills compared to the agency worker they've placed. If there are, they need to request comparative information such as pay, working time, annual leave entitlement, then compare this against their agency workers' terms and conditions and mandate uplifts to match those terms and conditions in line with AWR. This information actually needs to be requested prior to the 12 weeks to make preparations for when that 12-week qualifying period ends. They also should be asking for that information at regular intervals past the 12-week qualifying period, as AWR constantly applies past that period.
Okay, cool. So this obviously, yeah, could sound like a lot of work between like the agency and the end hirer. What happens if like the hirer does not cooperate with this?
Yeah, it can be a lot of work. So as long as the agency has actually taken reasonable steps to obtain this information, but the hirer has not responded, then the agency is actually not liable. So this happened in a case of an agency chasing a high school for comparator data. So the agency tried multiple times to obtain the data. They advised the school that, look, you're going to be liable if you don't cooperate. The school didn't reply, and the teacher who was placed realized the comparators were earning more than her after the 12-week qualifying period was over. The teacher made a claim, and the school was found to be 100% liable for paying the teacher that backdated uplift because there was evidence to show that they didn't cooperate with these requests the agency was making.
Okay, interesting. So lastly, how do we at Giant help our agency partners with AWR?
So we regularly request that information ourselves from our agency partners. So these emails that our agencies get might be annoying, but hopefully from this podcast, you understand the responsibility that parties have to obtain this information to protect ourselves and everyone in the supply chain. So we recommend you ask for your hirers, you ask them if they have comparators against your employees, you educate them on the regulation if needed. And what you can do is pass on the questions we send you to them. You can then feedback these answers to us, and we'll determine if any action is required, as we're the ones engaging the worker in the contract. So these processes we have will remind you to chase your hirers, whilst account managers such as me and Adam can be a source of advice in an area that can be quite daunting, really. So even if me and Adam do not have exact answers on what action to take and what to do, we have dedicated teams that do this full time, which ensure our employees are treated fairly.
Perfect. Nice one, Harry. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Harry, for that. And yeah, AWR can be a bit of a minefield, but yeah, hopefully Harry has made it a little bit more simple and answered some questions you may have. So yeah, we both obviously work here at Giant. If there's any way we can help with anything, please just reach out to us. And thank you again for your time. Cheers.
Nice. Cheers, guys.